Joining me this morning here in Studio A, members of the Burquinistas book club here in Farmington, which is much more than just that. But Joan Monninger is here this morning, one of the members. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Scott. Nice to be here.
Great to have you here. Also, I want to introduce our other guests in the studio this morning, too. Bev Taylor is here as well. Good morning.
Good morning, Scott.
Good to see you. And Ruth Allison is here this morning as well. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you all for coming in this morning. And Joan, let me start with you a little bit about the research you've been doing into this club, and that it's been a part of Farmington for a very long time in one manner or another, correct?
Yeah, we are actually this year celebrating 70 years as one of Farmington's remaining study clubs, and that really comes out of a larger history. So back in the late 19th, early 20th century, you see a lot of women's clubs forming. It's kind of what they call it the women's club movement,
Right.
part of the progressive era. And
that was to kind of share knowledge and information with each other, I guess? Not to interrupt you too many times.
No, women, so, women were really very much excluded from a lot of places of education, power centers for political and social life. And so they started forming these clubs, and they end up with an umbrella organization, the Women's Club Federation out of New York. You like New York.
Yeah, sure.
And it's really happening all over the country. And so in Aztec in 1908, you have a group of women getting together.
Here they
Della
are.
Good's house. Yeah, they formed the Altruian Society, or Altruian Club. And Altruian goes to an unselfish interest in humanity, and so that's where we get the word altruistic. And
Right.
so they form, and one of the things they're doing, besides learning and studying, is they want to make sure there's better education in the community. So they create the first public library. And
In Aztec.
That is in Aztec.
Right.
In the they move around buildings, but they end up in 1938 getting a building through the WPA, and that is a building that still exists there.
Right.
Not used as a library. We have a much more wonderful public library there now. But there is then the similar backstory to Farmington, and again, it's a women's club that starts up in Farmington, and that is Jessie. I'm going to help me. Muma.
Thank you.
Muma. I don't want to. My pronunciation around here sometimes is pretty poor. So they form a club in 1911, and then they end up again starting the public library in Farmington, and that really takes place at Lorena Mahaney's home. And for those who went out and
Still
saw
standing.
Dining with the Dead, which you and I are both in, Dining with the Dead, and I know Jessie was portrayed last year by Tara Taylor. I think it was last year. And anyway, Lorena Mahaney was portrayed this year by Deanne Waters, and she's the first librarian, and it's in her home for like a couple of decades before they too end up getting a building, a WPA building in the 1930s.
Right, which is
and
now
that building,
the Children's Museum.
Exactly. So I
Right.
think my understanding is Farmington Museum was there. It was the library, Farmington
right.
Museum, and now it is the E3 Children's Museum. So
Right. But
again,
originally-
there's this legacy.
Yeah, it was in this home on Arrington Street, which is still standing, and so it's a nice landmark, I think, for folks to recognize as they're driving around town. It doesn't look too different from this picture, although it's a little bit more renovated, we would say, and so got some TLC recently, so
Right, yeah.
that's a good thing. So long history, right?
Yeah,
and
it is, and it is part of this movement. And then, a lot of changes are taking place. And in the 1950s here, you have the oil and gas boom, and sort of this
Right.
new club starts up. There's going to be a federation, a second district New Mexico General Federation of Women's Club meeting in Farmington. And one of the groups that helps us is taking part in that is Las Burquinistas. And that is the group we're in. It is a study club. And I'm going
still
to,
meets
that
to
was enough
this
of
day.
the history. It still meets.
And so
it
70
is
years later,
my great honor, not being from here, moving out here, and then I was introduced to the club by Patty Tharp, who's our current president.
got it.
And I get to meet a couple of times a month with the most amazing ladies who are smart, they're well educated, they're well traveled, and
Cute.
And very attractive too.
There you are. That's right. See?
And get together and learn things that you don't know what you don't know, you don't know. So
Very, very true.
that is what we are all about.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you for that brief
And I will say
history.
we are making this year with our anniversary, we're making a donation to the Farmington Public Library in the name of Lorena Mahaney, who
Nice.
was the first public librarian in Farmington. Farmington, just to kind of commemorate that. So that's kind of a neat thing that we're doing.
Very good. And we're showing some of the articles from 1954, and then 1955 there was a program, a booklet published that we're showing now on the screen. And so the reason I wanted to talk about a little bit about this is because that's the 70 years that this group has been around, and Ruth Allison is here because Ruth has been there from almost the very beginning. You joined in 1964.
1963, I believe.
63.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what, 61 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, what was that like? You had just gotten to town, I think you were telling us, right? A few years prior.
We had to town recently. Bought a house next door to Betty Aaron's at that time.
Right.
She was very good to me. Introduced me to a lot of people. And when
She knew a lot of people, didn't she?
She knew everybody.
Yes, that's right.
And I hadn't been here long and got a phone call asking me to join the club. And as I say, I refused. And then I hung up and said,
But why
"Don't
did
be
you
stupid."
you had some kids to
I had
raise,
three
I
little
think.
kids.
Yeah.
And I thought, it was a different club than it is now. It was a very kind of a social gathering. Everybody dressed up. We followed Robert's Rules of Orders to the
Letter.
nth degree.
Okay.
Best bid and tucker, all best dishes in somebody's home.
Gotcha.
It was very different than it is today.
Sure.
Basically, it's the same thing.
Right. You would get together. How often would you get together? Was it a weekly meeting or once a month, twice a month?
Twice a month.
Twice
Second
as you do
and
now.
fourth. Always.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. And so and the discussion was about whatever was on people's minds or certain.
Whatever. Well, we would choose the subject for the year.
Got it.
And then everybody would have something that would have to do with the subject.
That's how you would focus.
That's how we focused.
Got it. Very good. And you've been a regular member now for these 61 years.
I have. I've gone away for a time or two, but never gave up my membership.
Good for you. Well, it's great to have you here. I can't tell you what a
Nice
thrill
to be here.
to have you on the program. So thank you for coming in and sharing that with us. And there's more to come, so don't
Don't
think
away.
you're off the hook. No, not at all. That's true.
Okay.
Bev Taylor, I want to come to you a little bit too because you are another member in good standing of this club and certainly have seen a lot of Farmington over the years and some of the things. Talk about how the club has morphed and grown and maybe changed if it has over your involvement.
Well, you have to be recommended. Someone has to bring you into the club.
Okay.
We keep our membership low, like to 20 members, so that we can meet in people's homes. That was the original intent. So we comfortably would fit in people's living rooms. And that's just kind of been our standard fare was 20 people. So that's probably why you don't hear a lot about it, because we're not in the hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
We're 20 people. And we meet twice a month in someone's homes.
Well, and if you're in like Ruth, you don't get out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to keep her.
Yes.
So you're recommended and you're voted on, and then you are added to our roster. And we have had just some amazing women in this community who have been part of this study club. It's not a book club. We don't all read the same book.
Okay.
We pick a topic that we vote on. At our final meeting in May, we usually make recommendations. People can say, how about this, and then we vote. And then that will be our topic starting in September.
Okay.
And we do, from that main topic, everyone picks what they want to do, what's relevant to them,
Mhm.
that can be relevant to the topic. And you end up with 14 amazing lessons about that topic through the year.
As you meet twice a month. Right.
Yes,
Mhm.
and it's a half-hour, 45-minute program. There's socializing also, but the actual serious part of the learning is about 45 minutes. It can run into an hour, but usually 45 minutes.
Right.
And as I came in when my twins were still in baby carriers. My mother-in-law, Miriam Taylor, got me in the club, and it was her mother, Jessie Muma, who was one of the founding people.
Right.
So there's kind of a long tradition there. And my twins will be 50 next month, so that's how long I've been in study club. And it's been an amazing journey as I kind of went through all of my file on study club last night, going through the programs that I have given. based on the topics that were chosen for the year, I realized how much I learned by doing the research on a random topic, or maybe it was something that I was already interested in, and then just reconfigured and put it together as a study club topic.
Right.
And go ahead.
I was just going to ask for both you and Ruth Allison, as young mothers, when you joined, how was it to rub elbows with some of Farmington's other, maybe more well-established ladies and like Betty Berry and people like that who were connected and knew the people and knew what was going on? How was that to be able to interact with those women twice a month?
It was wonderful. It was really a way to get acquainted with Farmington and get to be a part of Farmington.
Right. Because you moved here from where, Ruth Allison?
Well, from where last? Albuquerque, I guess.
Okay. Very good. And of course, in the 1950s, that was boom time here
That was
in
boom.
Farmington.
Oh,
So you
absolutely.
were in the middle of all that too.
Yes.
And coming in. And Bev Taylor, talk to me a little bit about the same kind of question, rubbing elbows with some of these other women that were part of the club. Certainly in your family you have a history, but what else?
Well, they really were the cream of the crop of Farmington. They were the women who made things happen behind the scenes, or so much community service was evident and available through those women. I set one study club time and made a list of the jobs of the husbands of the women who were in the club, and then the jobs of the women who were in the club. Many of them were retired, or they just they were like school teachers or secretaries, or they very seldom were ever executives or CEOs or COOs. They were teachers and behind the scenes people, but they contributed so greatly to what built Farmington. I mean, it was amazing. And their husbands literally built Farmington. There were oilmen and physicians, doctors, attorneys, land guys, teachers, you name it. And they literally were the movers and shakers of Farmington, and their women were right behind them. And so to have that legacy continue in our club it's just a really neat experience. The history is fascinating of the people, and as you read through the roster of people who've been part of this club, I just said a while ago that it brought a tear to my eye because there are just so many great women who have belonged to this club for, it's not a real huge obligation to belong to this. There's no money that changes hands, really. We just get together and learn stuff.
Yeah.
And
but you all have that in common.
We
that
do.
thirst for knowledge and learning, right, and sharing with each other.
We do have that. It's this continual learning,
right,
that we want to pursue.
Sure.
It's great.
And I wanted to point out the document we're sharing on the screen right now. This is some of the topics, I think, right? And Bev Taylor, your name's at the top of the list when you were president in 1980-81.
Right.
And it talks about eccentric historical figures, royal court life, and women of consequence was the program.
Right.
I could see that going in many, many different directions.
And they do. You never know what people are going to present a program on, which is also the very fascinating part of club. Everybody has their own backgrounds, their own interests, their own things that they want to study and learn more about. So they bring a program based on something.
Right.
And you never know.
Sure.
And you come away feeling so much smarter because you think, wow, I would have never studied that. I would have never read that article. I would have never thought to study that person. And that's what's fascinating. I brought a list, kind of a brief list of some topics.
Yeah.
That if you're in the presidency, if you're one of the officers, you don't have to give a program. So
Okay.
So sometimes that's a good thing. Sure, I'll be president as long as I don't have to give a program. So every member has to give a program and be a hostess one time through the year. And so if you don't have to do that, you have these other little responsibilities. But it's been interesting choosing programs because I was an art history major in school, and so I was fresh out of school when my mother-in-law got me to be part of this, and so my head was really full of all these exciting things. And one topic, we were trying to figure out something to study, and I said, well, one of my art history classes, the final question, the essay question was cross-section the year 1000.
Oh, okay.
Because everybody knows so much about the year 1000, right? Like what happened that year.
Right.
Well, you go, what? What happened?
And I
So,
think we see that on this list here, right? That was History, Arts, and Science in 1000 AD. That was 1985, 86.
right. So you can't see this, but I made this little sheet
Okay.
that was suggested topics
Nice.
that we could do based on the year 1000.
And of course, it's beautiful calligraphy because it's
Well,
Bev Taylor's.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that kind of led to another series of studies, which then was the year 1300 to 1400, and then that led to the French Revolution.
Sure.
That led to the Civil War, and then we studied both World Wars. So kind of that studying a year or a time period in history, I think has proved extremely valuable, as well as studying crazy characters and inventors and discoverers.
Right.
And those have all been extremely fascinating studies also. We never know what we're going to study next year until the end of
Right.
this year.
Sure. And I guess you don't know necessarily what the other members are going to bring to your meetings related to that topic, right? They could go in a really unique direction that you hadn't maybe thought of with that topic, right?
We do produce a program for the year.
Okay.
And in that program, if you know what you're speaking on, it's already published
You
for
put
the
it in
year,
there.
so we have it.
Okay.
But you don't always know.
Right.
You don't always know. So sometimes it's a surprise. You don't know what direction it's going to go.
Nice.
But I was just going to rattle off some of these
Sure.
that I had done. We did a year of food and the history of foods, which I found fascinating. And I did the history of salt
Oh.
and the importance of salt. We studied New Mexico history, all things New Mexico. And so I did the history of the chili pepper. And I also have done the history of food preservation. These were all topics that I personally did.
Right.
We studied the Civil War, and I did Abraham Lincoln. The year 1300, I did the history of Johannes Gutenberg and the history of movable type. I've done a program on Albert Einstein and Marie Curie. We studied New Mexico history, and I did, again, sometimes we bring them back, recycle good program topics.
Over 70 years, I could see where you might repeat one
You
or
have
two.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I did Mormon brick making in San Juan County, which was
Very unique, very local.
Yeah, and interesting to people, especially who had moved in
Sure.
and didn't know that.
She gestures to Joan.
because she's new.
Right.
Also, we did Women Who Changed the World, and I did a program on the Fred Harvey girls
Right.
and the history of all that train on the Santa Fe Railroad to New Mexico, and how that really did open up the West to
True.
tourism.
Right.
To tourism.
Right.
The Southwest became a critical component in tourism for the rest of the world, and the opening of the railroad, all of that became huge.
And that
just huge.
was so different than it is today. I mean, the idea of tourism or going to a place just to look around or explore or enjoy that place for being that place, that was just a whole different mindset in those days.
And Fred Harvey wanted the experience of traveling to the West to become still top quality, 5-star experience, and he thought through everything to make people traveling here from New York or Chicago really appreciate and fall in love with the Southwest.
Right.
And I think he did.
And it worked,
great-
yeah.
It worked.
That's
it
true.
really worked.
Yeah.
That's right. Those
We're
standards.
still from East. We're still coming out.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's
Aren't we,
true.
Scott?
That's true. Here we are.
Yeah.
I did a program on the history of the Black Death. before the pandemic, interestingly enough. And as I have thought back on that program, there were so many similarities and almost scary similarities.
Okay.
I did Lizzie Borden when we had crazy characters, you know. Lizzie Borden found an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Like, what kind of person is that? That was crazy,
Right.
but she was. So anyway, we've done the feminine mystique. We've done a journey, and people could pick what they interpreted that to be.
Right.
The history of food again. Somebody gave the history of food companies like Jell-O and Nestle's and Nabisco and Kraft. And so, you know, things that we use all the time, we think about all the time, but we never think to put a program together and really study as a group the history of that thing.
Right.
And I think that's another fascinating piece of all of this, is how we have taken this learning journey together and have this commonality of subject and topic and experience that is just incredibly enjoyable.
Right. Very true. Well, and again, to hear what the other members have to say and are bringing to the meetings, to the table, I guess, as you get together. And Ruth, I wanted to come back and ask you a little bit if you have any topics that you particularly enjoyed, or ones that you presented to the club.
One of my favorite years
Yeah.
was scandals.
Oh my.
And I did the Teapot Dome scandal.
Right.
Being from Wyoming, I'd heard so much about that. I was curious. That was one of my favorite years.
Got
one
it.
of my favorite topics.
Sure.
I learned something I hadn't known about, but heard about.
Right, right. Very good. And Joan, I want to come back to you because you're a member of this club, a more recent member.
I am, just a couple of years now.
Is there a topic that's come up since you've been a member that has struck you, that you've enjoyed?
Yeah, I have enjoyed them all. Like I said, things that I wouldn't think of before. One of the things, last year's overall theme was on the census, and again, so many different perspectives on it. But Martha Bradley, who I believe, retired gym teacher, right? I think so. Martha had this book she had read, and she did this program about how, you know, you take a bunch of different kinds of animals, put them in a gymnasium, and how they sense things based on, like, that animal, how that animal senses things. And it really was just brilliant. Again, something I never really thought of, because, you know, this animal, you know, senses things this way, this one, this, a human does this. So again, it's something I never would have thought of myself. I wouldn't have read that book. I wouldn't have chosen that book, but it was fascinating. And then this happens again and again, and I end up, different person suggests a book that they did the program
buy the
related
book.
to.
Go buy the
Right.
book.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just really fascinating. And again, the whole thing, and what Bev talked about, the history of the club being with the movers and shakers, and a lot of times the wives of movers and shakers. And I think coming back to that women's club movement, that's the precursor to so many things related to women's rights, so suffrage and other things. So now it doesn't have to be the woman behind the man. In my own case, I'm divorced, so I am in my own right. I'm an executive in my own right. And all of these women are just the most extraordinary group of women, and they are involved in so many different things in the community.
Sure.
So and we all have a seat at the table now, all right, ladies?
That's wonderful.
So,
Well, and that's wonderful. Yeah, and I think, you know, you mentioned the 1908 club. That was maybe one of the earlier clubs in Farmington, and just, again, for folks of history, that's prior to the women's right to vote, and so,
Oh, yeah.
you know, there weren't a lot of opportunities for women in those days, and so to come together and to share ideas and
It was
opinions
a
with each
safe,
other
a safe
was
space, and like
Yeah.
they were talking, they learned Robert's rules. They learned leadership skills that
Right.
then like, just continues to go forward, and that was a big deal, especially for women who were spending a lot of time in the house and raising children, and that is important too. I have my own kids, as you know.
right. Very true.
And it's kind of that whole holistic thing. You know, you can be a little bit of everything, I think.
Right. Very true. Bev Taylor.
We, in the early days, my early days as a member, women's names were listed also as under their husbands' names, Mrs. So-and-so. You know, I'd be Bev Taylor, Mrs. Thomas.
Mrs. Thomas
Taylor.
Taylor, yes.
So we also had the men's names in our program, like who cares now? I mean, we don't care.
Well, but that was the
That was the
standard, I
that
guess,
was-
right,
And-
at that
and-
days.
And there were.
Well, Tom did show up and give us all roses that one Valentine's,
That's
and that was
right.
really nice. We like that.
Nice.
So we used to meet in the afternoon, so it was more like a tea party, and you would get out your finest china and your silver and your crystal and your cloth napkins and set a little cloth table, and everything was just so beautiful, fresh flowers on the table, and we had this beautiful moment in an afternoon with these wonderful 20 women. And that tradition carried for a very long time. Then women started going to work, and so they would have to dash in from
Whatever they were doing.
whatever they were
Yeah,
doing,
right.
take off for a couple hours and come to study club. And then women started wearing pants, I couldn't wear pants in high school.
As we are all wearing right now, I
Right,
noticed.
sure. Well, as times change,
I couldn't wear pants in high school.
so the
And
club changed with the times.
It did.
It did,
And
yes.
I remember, I can't remember who it was, but I remember the first time that someone brought out paper plates to serve club. And I went, oh my gosh, my mother-in-law would be rolling over in her study club grave right now. It was almost like an abomination to me. Well, of course, now we all do that because it's just easy and quick, and we'd rather get on to the business at hand.
Sure.
Not Patty Tharp.
Yeah,
okay.
Patty Tharp collects teacups, so we always have beautiful teacups.
Gotcha. Very good. Well,
Anyway,
and
we all learned about manners in that kind of setting, how to serve, how to set up, what little treats would work well with women who didn't want to drip on their shirts or in their lap, or
Right.
whatever.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, again, it changed with the times, and it's amazing that it has been around for as long as it has been, these 70 years. Congratulations to all of you. And Joan, I wanted to come back with you because of your other job as executive director of the Aztec Museum and Pioneer Village. And as a historian, something that's been around for 70 years is really fascinating, I think, to study and to learn about, I would think.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know.
That was one of the most interesting parts of it to me, is that how it fits into this longer, history
Right.
in that place. And actually the General Women's Federation of New Mexico still exists. It's out of Las Cruces, and we're not a part of that anymore. But again, there is this legacy, and we're still part of that legacy. And the legacy is around us in the libraries and
Right.
in other things. And we're still part of this tradition, even though it changes. Maybe we're using paper plates now, but that's okay.
Right.
The basis of learning, coming together, women coming together and learning and asking questions and having really a good time together.
That hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed.
That's-
And it's still, like I said, the most remarkable group of women in Farmington.
Right. Bev Taylor.
According to us.
According to us.
Well,
right?
I would tend to agree too. That's a pretty prestigious group there.
We've also chosen to study things that were hard topics that most of us didn't know a lot about. A couple of years ago, we chose to study China because China has kind of become the elephant in the room. And so, topics ranged from banking to transportation to
Climate.
the climate, the
Right.
boom, the population boom, technology, all of that relating to China. We also studied the Middle East when the Afghan war was going, and we knew nothing about the Middle East, and most of us, and so we studied that. This year, we chose a really hard topic. It's AI, because we are all older and, have trouble even with our cell phones. So AI is turning out to be a very interesting year of study.
I would think so, right?
And you pick a topic that way and focus on it, and it's amazing what we all learn about AI.
I'm sure. Very true. Well, we just have a couple of minutes remaining this morning. I could sit here and talk to you ladies all day, which is it's wonderful. It's been fascinating for me, and so I really appreciate you all coming in. This is a couple more photos from a more recent meeting, I think, right?
It was the last meeting, yeah.
Your last meeting in November,
Yes.
right? And so
We meet at Artifacts, most of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Most of the meetings.
Again, another change that has occurred. Some still have it in their home,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of times Artifacts works out really nice.
got you. And so you're able to get together and chat and visit and share.
After the pandemic, we chose to meet at Artifacts instead of in people's homes because we have
Mm-hmm. A little bigger
wide open
space. Yeah, that makes
And see,
sense.
I didn't know that.
But some of the great
Stephanie
Images.
Byram doing her presentation last time.
On
which
AI
was
and energy.
okay.
consumption. Yeah.
That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah,
Right.
so very,
Right.
very good. Well, it's been fascinating, really, for me, just absorbing all of this from all of you, and I can't imagine to be a fly on the wall for some of those meetings and learn all the things that you all have learned over the years. And Ruth Allison, you are the elder stateswoman of the group, I guess, right? With your longevity
This
of
is what
61
I
years.
understand.
Yes, well, it is, and it's something that you still enjoy, and you still are an active participant in the club.
I don't have to give reports anymore.
You don't. That's the
No.
one
You gotta
thing.
buy.
I got to
Okay.
buy on that.
Okay.
So,
You might-
yeah.
But you still learn a lot, I imagine, from the other
I
presentations.
still learn a lot. I still enjoy it.
Which is wonderful. Well, it's great. Again, congratulations to all of you on 70 years and of all the knowledge that you've shared with the club members, and all of you, I think, have done your parts in making our community a little bit better as well.
You too, Scott. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm not in the
Because
club,
you're,
though.
Well, but you have your own study club that you're doing here
Well,
all the time.
we share with a
every
little
day.
larger audience, maybe.
Think of what you
So-
learn. Think of what you learn every day.
True.
mean,
Well, that is true.
really cool.
Here at San Juan College, we're all about lifelong learning, so
Right,
it
lifelong
fits
learning.
right in.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there,
yeah.
there you are. So wonderful. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Good to see
Thank
you
you.
all.
Okay.
Thanks for
Thank you.
being
Thank
with
you,
me.
Scott.
My guest from Las Burquinas Study Club celebrating their 70th anniversary here with me on KSJE.